Have you ever noticed how sometimes figuring out the right thing to do just feels like kind of a struggle? Like there's the inner battle going on, and it can be so hard to sort through all the different factors involved? What even is the right thing to do sometimes?
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of question that we're going to be tackling today. We're going to be doing a deep dive into morality, but not just in a simple, straightforward way.
Right. We're going to look at it from a whole bunch of angles.
Exactly. How does our own sense of morality, our own internal compass, interact with the situations that we find ourselves, with things like power dynamics and even stuff like our own health?
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And we've got some really cool sources lined up for this deep dive, too.
We do.
We're going to start with some of the heavy-hitting philosophy, Immanuel Kant.
Of course.
Then we'll look at some psychology research on how power plays into all of this morality stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll actually look at a study that connects moral character to health outcomes, which is so interesting.
Very interesting.
And finally, we'll wrap up with some practical advice, some insights on understanding your own moral conviction, like what you believe in light of your personal strengths.
It's going to be quite the journey.
So if you're interested in learning more about morality, but you don't want to get bogged down in, like a boring lecture, then this is the episode for you.
Stick with us. We're going to unpack all of this in a way that's fun and engaging.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. First up, we've got Immanuel Kant and this article in the Canadian Journal of Philosophy that really lays the groundwork for understanding what moral strength even means.
Right. So for Kant, he's not just talking about knowing what's right. He's talking about having the strength to actually do what's right. And he sees that as an active process, something that involves self-control.
Okay. So self-control, we all kind of have an idea of what that is.
Yes.
But in terms of morality, what does that really look like?
Well, in this article, they point out that for Kant, everyone has the capacity for self-control. But moral strength comes from, consciously choosing to use that self-control to kind of steer those impulses in line with your moral principles.
Okay, so it's not just something that you're born with. It's something that you have to cultivate, that you have to practice.
Exactly. Like a muscle.
Yeah.
The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And Kant even breaks down this idea of moral strength into what he calls a twofold account.
A twofold account. Okay, what does that mean?
So there's strength of intention, which he calls vorsatz.
Vorsatz.
And strength in action, which is that.
Okay, so vorsatz and that, those are the two key concepts here. Break that down for me a little bit more.
All right, so strength of intention, vorsatz, is all about compelling yourself to form intentions that are directed toward those moral goals. And this is especially important, he says, when you find yourself in a new situation.
Okay.
You've got to figure out, okay, how am I going to act in this situation so that I'm being moral?
So it's like you're setting your internal compass in a way.
Exactly.
You're deciding in advance, this is how I intend to act.
Yeah.
Because I believe that this is the right thing to do.
Yes. And it's not just a one-time thing either. It's like you're constantly having to reaffirm your moral compass in these new situations.
Okay, so intention's the first part.
Yes.
But then there's that.
Right. Strength and action. And that's all about pushing yourself to actually act or sometimes not act in a certain way, following those moral maxims that you've set for yourself. You've got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
You got to follow through.
Yes, exactly. And you've got to be consistent with it.
Okay, so the intention is there, and then you have to take action.
Yes.
Now, Kant makes this really interesting argument, right?
Yes.
He says that virtue, this moral strength that we're talking about, it can't just be a habit.
Right.
It's not like, brushing your teeth every day where you just do it automatically without thinking about it.
Right. For Kant, if it were just a habit, then it would be more like, some sort of mechanism. It wouldn't be something that you're freely choosing.
So you just automatically do something because it's a habit. You're not really engaging with the why behind it.
Exactly. You're not thinking about the moral principles that are guiding your actions.
Right. Yeah.
And so for Kant, true virtue, true moral strength requires, as they say in the article, considered firm and continually purified principles.
Okay.
And free maxim adoption.
So it's this active process. You're constantly choosing, you're constantly reaffirming your moral commitments.
Exactly. And it's not always easy.
Right. Because life throws us curveballs all the time.
Exactly.
We're faced with unexpected situations, unexpected temptations.
Yes.
And so that's where this moral strength really comes into play.
Right. You have to be able to reason through those situations and make those tough choices.
Right. Now, The article also talks about this idea of moral feeling, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not just about, understanding your duties intellectually, like knowing what you should do. It's about actually feeling a sense of obligation. Like it has to resonate with you on an emotional level.
Yeah. And for Kant, this moral feeling plays a crucial role in how we understand duty even. It's not just like a list of rules that you have to follow, but rather a sense of constraint toward pursuing some end that, you might not naturally feel inclined to pursue.
Okay.
It's the way that we, make duty our own. And it's connected to how we make ends that are duties, like something that's obligatory, into something that we personally value.
Right. So it's not just some external force telling you what to do.
Yes.
It's something that you internalize and that becomes part of who you are.
Exactly. And ultimately for Kant, the goal is to reach this state of what he calls purity of moral disposition.
Purity of moral disposition. Okay, what does that mean?
That's when the moral law itself is the sole incentive for your action. You're not doing things because you're afraid of getting punished or because you want to get rewarded. You're doing things because they're the right thing to do.
Okay, so this is like a very high standard.
It is. It's an ideal.
But it's something to strive for, right?
Exactly. And cultivating that moral feeling, that sense of obligation, that's part of how you get there. It means trying to make your choices based solely on what is morally right.
Right. Right. And so this moral strength, as Kant describes it, it's what makes it possible for us to actually live up to his, pretty famous categorical imperative.
Exactly.
This idea that there's this universal moral law that applies to everyone in all situations.
Right.
It's not just something that's out there in the abstract. It's something that we can actually apply to our lives because we have this moral strength.
Yes. It's what allows you to reason through those tough situations and make those difficult choices, even when it's hard. So the key here is setting the right intention and then being consistent in your action.
Okay, so that's Kant's take on moral strength. But now I want to shift gears a little bit and look at how external factors can affect our morality. Specifically, I want to talk about power.
Okay.
Our next source comes from Insade, and it's a review of research on power and morality.
Right.
And what's interesting is that this review challenges this common idea that power corrupts.
Yes, it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Power's effect on morality is much more nuanced, and they say it depends on a couple of key factors.
Okay.
One is something called behavioral disinhibition.
Behavioral disinhibition. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, and the other is what they call a focus on self.
Okay, so behavioral disinhibition and focus on self. Let's start with behavioral disinhibition. What is that all about?
So basically, when you have power, it can sometimes weaken those social and psychological constraints that normally keep our impulses in check.
So like the things that normally prevent us from acting on our every whim.
Exactly. And this can have both positive and negative consequences, believe it or not.
Okay, so how can it be positive?
So on the negative side, we have what they call moral corruption.
Okay, so that's what we typically think of when we think of power corrupt.
Right. It's when those unchecked desires that we have are actually immoral desires, and we have the power to act on them.
Right, right.
But on the other hand, if someone has a strong moral compass to begin with, power can actually amplify those moral impulses and lead to ethical behavior.
So power can kind of magnify who you already are.
Exactly. It's like it turns up the volume on your existing tendencies.
Interesting. So if you're already inclined to do good, power might give you the, resources or the confidence to do even more good.
Yes, exactly. And the review also points to some research that suggests that power can make people less likely to conform to negative social pressures.
Okay, so if everyone around you is doing something wrong, power might actually give you the strength to stand up for what you believe in. Interesting.
And this is actually connected to that whole idea of behavioral disinhibition. Because when you have power, you're less afraid of the social consequences of your acts.
Right, because you're kind of in control.
Yes, and you're also less dependent on social.
Okay, so that's the disinhibition part.
Yeah.
Now, what about this focus on self?
Okay, so the review explains that power can actually lead people to become more self-focused, more concerned with their own needs. Yes, and this can be a good thing in some way. It can make people more assertive, more confident in pursuing what...
But it can also have some negative effects, right?
Yes. Definitely. When people are too focused on themselves, they can start to lose sight of other people's needs and perspectives.
Right.
And this can lead to all sorts of problems like objectification and dehumanization.
Yeah, like if you're just focused on your own goals, you might start to see other people as obstacles in your way.
Exactly, or as tools to be used to achieve your own ends. And this can really have a negative impact on your moral behavior.
Right, because if you don't see people as fully human, it becomes much easier to justify treating them poorly.
Exactly. But here's the thing. The review also found that this self-focus that comes with power can actually lead to moral behavior in certain situations.
Really? Okay, that's surprising.
Yeah. So, for example, powerful people are less likely to engage in unethical behavior that would only benefit someone else.
Okay, so why is that?
Well, it's because they're so focused on themselves.
Uh,
They're less likely to want to risk their own position or reputation to help someone else out.
so their self-interest is actually protecting them from doing something wrong in that case.
Yes, exactly. And the review also mentions a study that found that powerful people are more likely to give honest, critical feedback even when it's difficult.
Interesting.
And this is because they're less worried about what other people think of them. They're more confident in their own judgment.
So they're not trying to sugarcoat things or please everyone. They're just being straightforward, which in some cases could be the more ethical thing to do.
Exactly. And so the review argues that power isn't inherently good or bad. It's all about how you use it.
Right.
And they introduced this really interesting concept called acceleration while steering.
Acceleration while steering. Okay, what is that?
So basically, it's when you have power, but you're also actively considering the needs and interests of other people.
So it's like you're not just focused on your own destination, you're also paying attention to the passengers in your car.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they give this example of a study where they looked at how managers write layoff letters.
Okay.
And they found that the managers who had power, but who also took the time to really think about the impact of the layoff on the employee, they wrote letters that were perceived as much fairer and more respectful.
So even in a situation where you have to make a tough decision, like laying someone off, you can still exercise your power in a way that's more ethical and more considerate of the other person's feelings.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between your own goals and the needs of others.
Okay, so we've talked about internal moral strength with Kant and the external influence of power. Now, I want to focus on another interesting connection, the link between moral character and well-being.
Okay.
Our next source is a study that was actually published in the Journal of Positive Psychology.
Okay.
And it's called Prospective Association Between Strengths of Moral Character and Health.
Interesting.
So this study looked at data from a large sample of working adults,
Uh-huh.
and they wanted to see if there was a connection between people's moral character strength and their health outcome, both mental and physical.
Okay, so how did they measure something like moral character strength?
So they used a bunch of different measures to assess 7 key indicators.
Okay.
The first one was having a strong moral compass.
Okay, so that's basically knowing what's right.
Yeah, knowing the difference between right and wrong.
Uh-huh.
Then there was having an orientation towards promoting good.
So actively seeking to do good in the world.
Exactly. Then using your strengths to help others.
Right.
Kindness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the ability to delay gratification. So being patient, thinking about the long-term consequences of your actions.
Right.
And they followed these individuals over time.
Uh-huh.
And they looked at both their self-reported mental and physical health.
Okay.
And they also looked at their medical records to see if they had been diagnosed with certain conditions.
Okay. So what did they find?
They found some really fascinating stuff.
Okay, tell me.
So they found that people who had stronger overall moral character scores, and especially those who had a strong moral compass,
Okay.
were significantly less likely to experience symptoms of depression.
Really?
Yeah. The odds were something like 21% to 51% lower, which is a pretty big difference.
Wow, that's a huge connection.
Yeah. And they also found positive associations between moral character strengths and people's self-reported mental and physical health.
So it wasn't just about depression, it was also about their overall well-being.
Exactly. And while the findings were more tentative, they also found some evidence suggesting that being able to delay gratification might protect against anxiety,
Okay.
and that using your strengths to help others might be linked to a lower risk of cardiovascular.
Interesting.
So it seems like there's a pretty strong case to be made for the idea that being a good person, living a life guided by strong moral principles, can actually be good for your health.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how those two things are connected, right?
Exactly. And the study authors, they actually talk about a few different possibilities.
Okay.
So, for example, they suggest that the link between a strong moral compass and a lower risk of depression could be related to how our brains process moral decisions and regulate emotion.
Okay.
You know, maybe having a clear sense of right and wrong actually helps us to manage our emotions more effectively.
Right.
And then the benefits of altruism and kindness,
Uh-huh.
they might stem from having stronger social connections and experiencing more positive emotions.
Okay.
And then using your character strengths to help others can also give you a greater sense of meaning and purpose in life, which we know is so important for well-being.
Yeah, definitely.
And finally, being able to delay gratification can lead to healthier lifestyle choices over time, like exercising regularly, eating a healthy diet, things that are good for your physical health.
Right, right.
So it all kind of makes sense when you think about it, right?
It does.
Helping others feels good.
Yeah.
Having a sense of purpose is important.
Uh-huh.
And making thoughtful long-term decisions generally leads to better outcomes.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Yeah. Now, we also wanted to touch on another study.
Okay.
This one from Phil Archive.
Okay.
And it's called Character Strengths and Moral Functioning.
Okay.
So this study took a slightly different approach. Instead of focusing on just 7 moral character strengths, they looked at a broader range of 24 strengths.
Okay.
And these were measured using a different tool called the GACS, the Global Assessment of Character Strengths.
Got it.
And they were specifically interested in how these strengths related to different aspects of moral function.
Okay, so how did they define moral functioning?
So they look at things like moral reasoning,
Okay.
empathy, and moral identity.
Okay, so like how central morality is to your sense of self.
Exactly. And they found that character strengths did play a role in predicting moral functioning.
Interesting.
But what was particularly interesting is that 2 strengths stood out as being especially important.
Which ones?
Wisdom and gratitude.
Wisdom and gratitude. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. So wisdom, having a good understanding of the world, being able to see things from different perspectives, it seems like it would naturally lead to more ethical behavior.
Yeah.
And then gratitude, appreciating what you have, focusing on the positive, that can also make you more likely to treat others well.
Right.
So this study kind of adds another layer to our understanding of the connection between character and morality.
Yes. It's not just about being a good person in general. It's about cultivating specific strength that can support your moral decision-making and your moral actions.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about philosophy, we've talked about psychology, we've talked about health.
Yes.
Now, let's bring it all together and talk about some practical applications.
Okay.
Our final source comes from Leadership Vision Consulting, and it's all about how to connect your personal strengths to your moral conviction.
Right. So the main idea here is that we all have these strengths that we use to support our moral convictions, like what we believe is right and wrong. And these strengths, they become the tools that we use to live out those convictions in the world.
Okay.
But they also make this really important point, which is that moral convictions can be a bit of a double-edged sword.
Okay, how so?
Well, if we're not careful, they can lead us to judge other people who don't share those same convictions.
Right.
And that can create distance and conflict between us.
Yeah, and it's so easy to fall into that trap, right?
It is.
We judge other people by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intentions.
Exactly. And so it's important to be self-aware, to recognize when our convictions are leading us to be judgmental.
And the piece suggests that understanding your own strength can actually help you to set healthy boundaries around your moral convictions.
Right.
They give this example of a client who had really strong communication skills.
Okay.
But because he was so direct and assertive, he sometimes came across as aggressive or insensitive.
Okay.
And so by understanding his communication style as a strength, he was able to adjust his approach and communicate his convictions in a way that was more respectful and more effective.
So it's not just about having the right convictions. It's also about knowing how to express those convictions in a way that's constructive and that doesn't alienate other people.
Exactly. And the piece also reminds us that our moral convictions, they're not static. They evolve over time as we learn and grow.
Right.
They use the example of changing views on marriage. What might have seemed completely wrong at one point in time might seem perfectly acceptable now.
Exactly. And as our understanding of the world changes, so do our morals.
Right. And what's really insightful is that they suggest that understanding other people's strengths can help us to understand their behavior and their moral convictions better.
Yeah, especially when they're under pressure.
Right.
So, for example, someone who's naturally very cautious might seem indecisive in a crisis situation.
Okay.
But that's just because their strength of caution is being amplified in that moment.
So what might look like a moral failing on the surface could actually be a strength that's being overused or misused in a particular situation.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really important to keep in mind, I think.
It is.
And the piece actually provides this really simple, but I think powerful activity that you can do to explore these ideas in your own life.
Okay.
So basically, you think of a moral conviction that you hold.
Okay.
And then you list the personal strengths that support that conviction. What are the strengths that allow you to live out that conviction in the world?
Right.
And then you think about what boundaries you might need around those strengths.
Okay.
How can you make sure that you're using your strengths in a way that's constructive and not destructive.
Right.
And their final thought is that by focusing on the positive aspect of our strengths, we become more aware of when something feels morally wrong to us, when it just doesn't sit right with who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like our strengths can act as an internal guidance system.
Uh-huh.
They can help us stay on our moral path.
They can help us to course correct.
Exactly. So, wow, that was a lot.
It was.
We covered a lot of ground today.
We did.
But hopefully you can see how all of these different pieces fit together.
Yes.
We started with Kant's ideas about building inner moral strength.
Mm-hmm.
Then we looked at how external factors like power can influence our morality.
Right.
We explored the connection between our character and our health. And we finished up with some practical tips on understanding your own moral convictions through the lens of your personal strength.
And I hope that this has given you some food for thought.
Yeah.
Think about your own life.
Yeah.
How do your strengths influence your sense of right and wrong?
Uh-huh.
Have you ever seen power dynamics affect people's morals?
Right.
And do you think that there's a connection between your character and your overall well-being?
Yeah, definitely some things to reflect on. And that activity from Leadership Vision Consulting sounds like a great place to start.
It is. It's a really good way to start connecting these ideas to your own life.
Absolutely.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. In a world that's full of, really complex ethical dilemmas and where power dynamics are constantly shifting, how can a deeper understanding of both your inner moral compass and the external forces at play help you to navigate those challenges with more wisdom and integrity? We encourage you to keep exploring these ideas and to keep striving to be the best version of you.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.